Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Whatever your time zone, welcome. This is AI Talk, and I am your host, Kevin Crane. Welcome to the show. Today, we'll be discussing the topic of closing the AI ready data gap in modern marketing. Now, this is a topic that is crucial as organizations try to leverage AI for smarter marketing and customer experience and business decisions. According to research last year by TechTarget, even with widespread adoption of dashboards and automation, less than 25% of UK organizations regularly analyze data for insights, and fewer than 30% use their data for AI or automated decision making. So, in this session, we'll break down how to future proof your customer data platform. Specifically, we'll explore three key areas: how fragmented systems are failing regulatory and insight demands, why flexible composable architectures are essential for AI today, and what an AI-ready CDP must support in 2026. Look, we've got a big panel and a great topic today, and we're going to dive in just a second. But first, I want to say thank you to everyone attending today, and that includes the folks joining us live on LinkedIn. Hello, everyone. And everyone joining us today also on Zoom. Thank you so much for being with us. As always, during this discussion, I'd like to hear from you too. So I'd like to encourage everyone attending today to participate. Just join in with your comments in the chat section. If you have a question along the way, just jump on in and I will attempt to get some of your questions and comments into the flow of the show. All right, let's get to our great panel of guests today, starting with Joe Pulikal, Director of Product Management at Unifor. Joe, are you with us?
Yes, thank you so much, Kevin.
Hello, Joe. It is great to have you with us today. Where are you calling in from?
I'm based out of New Jersey, and it's been snowing here for the last few days, so
Yes.
we put in a little bit.
All right. Well, it's great to have you with us. Thank you so much, Joe. Also joining us today is Dr. Leah Hendricks, Managing Director at Hark Consultants. Leah, are you with us today?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks for
Hello,
having
Leah. It is great to have you with us today. Where are you calling in from?
London. Certainly not snowing, but there is a cold.
Well,
Oh, come
all right.
on.
Well, Leah, it is great to have you with us. Thank you so much. Also joining us today is Francesco Federico, Chief Marketing Officer at S&P Global. Francisco, welcome aboard. Where are you calling in from?
Hi, Kevin. Thanks for having me. I'm calling from London as well.
Wonderful. London, double London today. Fantastic. And also joining us today is Justin Billingsley, co-founder and CMO of Symbiotic, excuse me. Justin, welcome aboard. Where are you calling in from today?
Well, I normally wake up in London like the other two, but today I'm in Budapest with our engineering team because there are more engineering PhDs per capita in this country than anywhere else.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Justin, Francesco, Leah, and Joe. It's great to have you all with us today. Look, I'd like to start our discussion today by pointing our attention to an article published recently by martech.org. The article warns that marketing teams are rushing to implement AI governance without first defining strategy or business outcomes, leading to what the authors call governance theater, where policies exist but lack direction and measurable goals. The article urges planning before governance and investment for meaningful AI impact. I am wondering what everyone thinks about this article. Joe, what are your thoughts about the article?
Yeah, so when I was reading the article, I was thinking about this in context of the conversations I have with a lot of my customers and potentially folks that want to leverage the capabilities that we are building here at Unifor. And one thing that was consistent with what I see and what the article defined was that more than the AI problem, the marketing organization struggles with a decision architecture problem. And so when I think about a decision architecture, I'm thinking, hey, what data should be used? How should it be leveraged to make those decisions? Who makes those decisions and when? Is it a human? Is it a workflow? Is it a rule? Is it a model? Is it AI? And so if we don't have that decision framework or architecture in place, anything that follows that is not going to conform, right? It's going to look like waste. There's going to be AI slop. It's going to be automation failures. And so, as I was thinking about the article and the components in there, one thing that was clear was if I was making a dish, my decision architecture is really my recipe, and food safety is basically governance. And so I can have great food safety, but if I don't have a recipe, I don't have a dish.
And you're not cooking, if you will. All right. Well, very good. Well, Leah, the article mentions that most organizations have AI policies and committees, but few have planning horizons or ROI targets. What is the impact of this?
Yes, I think, many marketing teams, I think certainly, are looking at governance, and many of these policies are being kind of enforced in a way. But the clear thing is that AI without a marketing strategy or really the governance really outlines failure. So if I look at it from a platform's perspective, AI governance without a clear marketing strategy really turns platforms into control mechanisms instead of growth engines. And so from a platform perspective, right, that's the problem because platforms should actually design and enable the outcomes, not just enforce it. So policies are there to, of course, align governance, but the clarity really is around the customer decisions. Think about it from a marketing perspective. You're trying to improve or really scale, and that's a problem. Platforms should enable the outcomes. You're not really enforcing the rules. Marketing really is struggling because it lacks the governance. It struggles when governance isn't tied to how value is actually created. So think about segmentation, think about prioritization, personalization. You mentioned revenue, right? We're really trying to outline that as marketing, we're driving that outcome. So when the governance is disconnected from those decisions, it creates the friction, it slows adoption, and ultimately it limits the impact. So quite, simplistically, good AI governance in marketing, it isn't about really stopping the teams from using AI. It's about giving them the confidence really to use it well and help drive that scale and that revenue in ways that, can be explained.
Now, Francesca, what Leah is describing, does this result in a situation where organizations may have some tactical efficiency gains, but not really much strategic value?
Yes, I think so. And I think, to be honest, we're now well into 2026 and past the phase where we could accept this proliferation of pilots just for the sake of, trying something out. We are now into a stage where I think organizations need to think very clearly about what is the commercial outcome or efficiency outcome that we want to drive, and then see whether the technology, in this case AI, can help. So I think in many ways, this AI wave of adoption is not that different from the previous transformation waves. If I think about, digital transformation, when used to be a term, very often organizations jumped at the opportunity of embracing some sort of automation or technology, again, without thinking about the outcomes. And so I very much agree with the point that governance to this extent is an enabler because it really helps force the thinking into the direction of the outcome that we want to drive. So it's not, again, governance to slow down or to limit, but quite the opposite, is to recognize that we're now in a mature phase of AI integration and adoption. And with maturity comes the responsibility towards the organization to drive change based on the commercial outcome we want to drive, not just change for change's sake.
Good point. Drive change for commercial outcome and not just for change's sake. I like that. Now, Justin, what are your thoughts on the article? And is it indeed a situation where we're overwhelming practitioners and resulting widening gaps between leadership vision and execution?
Well, I mean, marketers aren't always the first in line to embrace governance in general.
Right.
They're kept up at night, worried about things like brand safety. I look at this. I look at the article and the question of governance at really two levels of altitude. Altitude level one is, I think marketers have been heavily involved in the governance of what they are or are not empowering different AI point solutions, what decisions can be taken. Of course, IBM famously had a manual in 1971 saying a computer can't make a decision because a computer can't be held accountable, but we're giving millions of decisions to these systems each day. I think they've been more interested in the governance within the decision a particular AI tool can take within the scope that it plays, they have not adequately stepped up to look at the end-to-end construct of these point solutions or the workflows to make sure that there's governance of at what point we're moving past the, as Francesco said, proof of concept prison that we've all been in, into making some enterprise decisions, into scaling what matters, and how we're going to decide to further invest in those things. So there's a lot of work to be done there. I think there's been an obsession with brand safety, but that's not where the real risk is, because those risks happen regardless whether AI is making the decisions or a human is making those decisions. The bigger question is everyone's staring at each other, waiting for the right enterprise solution, and there's still first mover advantage out there to be had.
All right. The article is from martech.org. It is AI governance without strategy is setting marketing teams up to fail. There is a link here in the chat feature. We'd like to hear from you folks, people that are attending with us today. What do you think about the article? Is it resonating with your place of business? And does the article miss anything important that we should also be considering? So please take a look and let us know. And in fact, we'd like to know a little bit about what you're thinking today. Indeed, we have a poll today, and if we could set that poll up, and we'd like to ask everyone attending today, where do you see the biggest challenges today when it comes to integration and AI? There is a poll up here on the screen. If you take just a couple of minutes here to reply with your thoughts while we move on, that would be great, and let us know what your thoughts are. All right, everyone, I'd like to, while the people are paying attention to the poll today, I'd like to move us on to our first discussion point. And that is how fragmented systems are failing regulatory and insight demands. Many organizations struggle because data is spread across different disconnected systems, creating compliance risks and slowing insights. Indeed, according to Experian, 62% of marketing leaders report their teams cannot trust their data due to this fragmentation or duplication. So, Joe, I'm wondering, from your experience, what are the biggest operational risks when marketing data is fragmented across multiple systems?
Yeah, I kind of think about it in four different areas. So first one's compliance. You kind of alluded to it as you were kind of asking the question. So if I have data in different places, I have multiple interpretations of identity. And because of that, I have multiple interpretations of consent and how a person consents to be targeted. And when I have these two components now sitting in various different tools, now I have one system that suppresses a customer, another one still activates that customer, a third one doesn't know what happened, and then this exposes you to a compliance, a compliance or an audit fail, right? So that's number one. Number two is inconsistency in customer treatment, right? Like, so I have all this data in different places. Each channel has their own strategy. Each activation strategy does not know what's happening on the other side. You end up messaging the same person in different ways. Now, as a customer, I experience the organization through the brand, but if I don't show up or act like one, then I'm not sure what experience I'm supposed to anchor to as a customer, right? So that's number two. Leah actually talked about this a little bit, and it kind of was more on the governance side. But if I was to think about it, there's going to be operational risk with respect to decision latency. So if I have data in various places, now I'm manually bringing that data in one place, trying to figure out how I use it. And if I have an idea and I want to get to that execution or outcome, it takes forever, right? For me to like understand what is in there to be able to even figure out how I want to strategize. As you're thinking about that decision latency, now introduce real-time decisioning. That's almost like a non-starter, right? So you have to wait for so long before you can even act on in the moment use cases, if you will. And then the last one is with this fragmentation across, you're now delaying automation, you're delaying AI adoption in a meaningful manner, in a responsible manner as well. So I would say those are the four operational risks from my perspective.
Yeah, that's a great framework and can help us quickly identify gaps where we may need to pay strategic attention. Now, Leah, we were talking a moment ago, the article was really focused on generating insights and meeting regulatory demands. How do you feel fragmented systems impact our ability to really generate insights that matter along with meeting regulatory demands?
I think from my side, there's two areas, but let me start by saying that fragmentation doesn't just slow insight, it actually breaks down trust. And from a marketing perspective, trust is quite critical, right? So think about it. Fragmentation breaks down trust before it actually breaks technology, if you really think about it. So marketing stacks have gone, kind of beyond what they are today because they've grown organically or really not intentionally, right? We end up adding tools for every new requirement. And that's the problem. Marketing stacks evolved, through well-intentioned local decisions, right? We think it's a good decision, but without that end-to-end design, because that strategy is not in place as to what we're really trying to achieve before we end up including another tool. So think about CRMs, CDPs, data warehouses, consent systems, which, Joe, you just mentioned, AI tools, they often operate in silos. And that creates duplicated data, right? If we really think of silos, there's inconsistent customer views, unclear data lineage as well. So when I look at it from a regulatory perspective, it's regulatory risk. So teams can't really, clearly explain where the data is coming from, how consent was applied, or why the decision was made. And then therefore the insights demand fails.
Mm-hmm.
Teams spend more time actually reconciling the data than actually acting on it.
All right, now, Justin, I want to ask the group here in a moment about this idea of trust. So thank you, Leah, for bringing that up. But Justin, also, I'm thinking when it comes to CDP, I'm thinking the big blue chips for me are customer engagement and decision making. So how does a fragmented data environment affect my ability to boost customer engagement and decision making in my marketing operations?
I mean, it comes back to the why. Why are you collecting? Why do you have this data in the first place? The only value of it is if it changes the intended behavior of the people whose data you have. So if you want to change how they feel about something, what they do about something, any fragmentation you have, given that they have hopefully consented and trusted you with that data in order to improve their journeys, any fragmentation, you're letting that side of that contract down. Plus, we're talking about fragmentation in the sense of a CDP or the data owner. We've got to remember that the fragmentation then multiplies as you consider how you have to match that with what's on agency side, how you have to match it in various clean rooms with various platforms, whatever. Every single time you are trying to match a fragmented set to someone else's probably fragmented set, you make the problem insolvable. And I think we really need to all come back to the core reason we have this, and that is it's been such a long time that we've known more about people than we really needed to do something useful with. Now we have the technology to take those data signals to actually do something useful with it, but we haven't taken the time to clean up the data so that we can. So everything only ever goes as fast as the next broken bit of the chain. Data has been broken. We kind of tolerated it because we were only really using it for media rather than content or messaging. Now we have the technology where we can, and we're seeing all the fragmentation. So we really have to join these things up a lot better than they are.
Now, Francisco, I want to get to you in a moment, but we do have some poll results coming in. Thank you very much, everyone, for providing your responses to the poll. 67% of you say your biggest challenge today is making customer data usable for activation. 33 are struggling with scaling personalization beyond just basic rules, and also another 33% is all about trust and governance and explainability. Again, I will be asking here in a moment about the idea of trust, but first, Francisco, to sort of put a bow on this section of our discussion, I believe in the old adage, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So how can marketing leaders measure whether their data architecture supports these needs?
Well, I think one way I look at it is really, again, going back from what is that we're trying to drive. So, for example, in the case of a demand generation campaign, we obviously want to be able to measure the effectiveness and the pipeline ultimately. And so it's this sort of rolling back from there and making sure that we have all the connectors, all the insights across the entire journey of in this case, a digital lead, from the consideration stage down to sort of pipeline generation. And I think this helps to the points that Jolie and Justin made. Very much agree with. It's about trying not to boil the ocean, because it can be at times a little bit overwhelming when you think about having your data a little bit on the CRM system, a little bit of it on some journey orchestrator platform, and then you have your marketing automation platforms. So trying to get everything right at once in a data lake, for example, might be a little bit of a daunting task. And so what I try to do is to really look again at, as you said, what do we need to measure? What is really important to the business that is moving the needle? And in this case, for example, making sure that we can demonstrate that $1 million that go into demand generation campaigns are actually measurable, and we can demonstrate the ROI of the investment. And then we go point by point and sort of signal by signal, identifying the data insights we need to gather in order to bring that view, and then you expand from there. And I think in this case, it becomes more manageable, and also, to be frank with you, easier to get the resources within the organization to get the job done, because some of this data normalization and standardization and consolidation can be expensive at times. And so in order to get that internal buy-in, you want to grow gradually, demonstrating the value that the work around data is bringing to the organization.
All right, very good. Now, we have a question or a comment coming in from our viewers today. This one coming from Carly. And Carly, thank you so much for your contribution today. We appreciate your participation. Carly is asking, and I'd like to open this up to the entire group, so please jump in if you have a thought for Carly. But Carly is asking, so how can AI models be trusted if the underlying data foundation is built upon inconsistent, stale, or duplicated records? No end-to-end design, fragmented systems. It's a great question, Carly. Folks, what are your thoughts for Carly on this? Anyone?
Yeah, I could take a stab at it. So
Please.
so trust in AI does not come from perfect data most of the time, right? Like, so I know data is never going to get to a place where it's going to be amazing and great and pristine. It's a journey, right? But where trust comes from my perspective, is knowing what data can be used, knowing how the data can be used to make a decision, and then trying to see, as I'm making these decisions, how do I provide feedback in a timely manner so it can adjust and learn. And so sort of thinking a little different from the thinking of, hey, we need to create the system of record, to shifting focus to how do we create a system of intelligence that meets us or meets you where you are in your data journey. And then, and you have to go through it, right? You have to make sure that you have the governance processes, you have to make sure you have data quality processes, you have the right data mining processes. And so that's where really trust starts to form. And version 1 is not probably going to be awesome, right? But you cannot abandon at version 1. You have to keep iterating through that and making sure you get to that useful trust level versus thinking about just quality of data. That's how I would probably think.
I think from my side, I probably look at it from acting on the data that you can confidently act on. So if you really think about it, the point I was making earlier is that trusting that data is quite important. So if you can't explain where your data comes from, you can't trust it. And if you can't trust it, you won't let AI act on it. So it's about that responsible AI strategy and really looking at explainability. where is your data coming from? You know, how are you actually acting on that data? And if you can explain your data, you can then trust it. And if you can trust it, then you can really drive your strategy. So for me, it's really working, if everything is fragmented, work with the data that you know you can act on, and then try and, you know, remove all of those silos. Start to work with how you integrate it. And then that will really start to help scale the insights and your automation, because that's where we struggle with a lot of dashboards everywhere, but not really acting on the data that you feel is worthy and that you can trust.
I'd actually suggest flipping the telescope on this question, because we've kind of interpreted as in we've got to get the data set pristine in order to then hand it over to the magical AI agents to do their job. If there's one of all of the use cases that AI is good at, cleaning, assessing, finding holes in, finding patterns in data is probably what they're at best at. They're actually better at looking at defragmenting the data set that we may one day trust them with, more so than taking a perfect data set today and giving it to them. They are built on finding patterns in history. That is the fundamental basis of a foundation LLM. It's patterns in history. And so it's a perfect use case for them is to help with the defragmentation so they can then be trusted to make decisions rather than wait till it's perfect and then hand it over.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps if I can offer like a pragmatic sort of point of view, I think the question I would ask is trust. Trust for what? Trust to do what? Because it really depends. You know, there might be use cases where a commercial model that has been trained on sort of duplicated records, etc., is still good enough, you know, to deliver on specific use cases. If I'm thinking, for example, at, you know, I don't know, we're running a campaign into a new market and we need to brainstorm on personas and segments, I would be open, you know, to leverage a commercial model, even though it's not perfectly trained, or even we don't even know how it has been trained. But on the other hand, if I am looking at mission critical use cases, if I'm dealing with our own proprietary corporate data, of course I wouldn't trust a model hasn't been trained end to end in a way that I can be comfortable with. And so I would be looking at hybrid solution at a minimum, if not even sort of creating dedicated technologies. And this is really the way we look at this. I mean, we're lucky enough to have an in-house AI company at S&P Global, and that's where really we put the high sort of mission critical, high stakes use cases. But again, for us in marketing, when I think about productivity of efficiency, even using commercial models that are widely known can be a perfectly acceptable solution, as long as obviously we don't share any sensitive confidential data. So I think the concept of trust should also be pragmatically looked at through the lenses of what is that we need to achieve in each use case.
Mm-hmm. All right, very good. This is AI Talk. I'm Kevin Crane. I'm here with Joe Pulical, Dr. Leah Hendricks, Francesco Federico, and Justin Billingsley. We're talking about closing the AI-ready data gap in marketing. And Carly, thank you for a wonderful question today. Folks, I'd like to move us on to our second discussion point today, and that is what should we do about this? Why a flexible composable architecture is essential for AI. Rigid monolithic systems often prevent marketers from integrating AI quickly or responding to change and customers' needs. So organizations, according to Gartner, that adopt composable architecture are over 2.5 times more likely to scale their AI initiatives successfully. So Joe, how do composable architectures enable faster AI adoption in marketing organizations?
Kevin, before I answer that question, I want to probably define composability for maybe 30 seconds.
Please.
So when I talk about composability, and when I think about composability, I think about the ability to change, replace, or evolve parts of a system independently without necessarily needing to re-platform all workflows and everything all at once, right? So what for me specifically, what that means is, how do I separate data, decision logic, and maybe execution and learning from each other so that I can evolve each of them in its own pace. Because all of these evolve differently. And I agree with Francesco and Justin as they're talking about it as to, hey, maybe some of these components can be repurposed in other places as we're thinking about composability. So that's on the architectural design standpoint. When I'm thinking about process and people, it sort of composability also extends a little bit to those two layers as well, from a standpoint of how, as a process how do I introduce new data sources? How do I introduce feedback and context at the right time? And then from a people standpoint, who are the people who are making these decisions and how are they aligned to this? So again, going back to the architectural conversation, composability for me means evolving parts of a larger system independently to make sure that everything works well and I can shift and move things without breaking the system. Now, hopefully we all agree. And again, when you speak, please feel free to add your thoughts as well. But what I'm thinking is, when we think about composable systems specifically to bridge the gap, now we're thinking about how do we have models, data sources, decisions, or decision policies evolve separately, because as we all know, there's so many different things that happen in the world of AI on a daily basis. You want a system to have the ability to adopt those as soon as possible, whether it's a protocol, whether it's a new model, whether it's a new way to inference, whether it's a new way to take feedback. You want to be able to incorporate that, at the same time give enough flexibility and optionality so that you're solving the problems at the right pace, right? With the right intent. So that's how I think about the flexible architecture that you need to have as a core design principle, and an operating model, almost to the point where architecture is not an afterthought. It is a core operating model of how you're defining future state. But let me pause there, and I would love to hear what the panelists have to say as well.
Well, Leah, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on what Joe has been mentioning. What do you see are the most common mistakes organizations make when attempting to implement such a flexible architecture?
So I think, to kind of add on to what Joe is saying, but firstly, I think to agree is also, from my view, I see it as modularity, in a simplistic way from my side. But I think from a marketing leadership lens, it isn't about architecture purity, really. It's about resilience and choice and speed to value, right? Because that's a key component of what I look at is value creation and value strategy. And then I think, secondly, to answer your question on some of the key issues, I think why flexible, composable architectures are essential from an AI perspective is that it actually exposes the costs of rigidity. AI evolves too fast, right? We think about it, monolithic platforms, and that's what I look at. It really can't keep up. So composability allows organizations to keep what already works. It connects intelligence and intelligence across different systems, and then also adopts models and capabilities without starting over. So from a marketing standpoint, you're able to simplify things and really frame that architecture in an easy way without having to rip it out. So marketing can evolve without, rip and replacing. And everything really drives that time strategy. You can do regulation, AI capabilities, all of that can really change really easily. So this is how organizations reduce that lock-in. You can limit duplication and you can really future-proof your data foundation.
Now, Justin, what's your take on all of this? We're balancing the needs for insights and flexibility and governance and data quality. What do you recommend for organizations that may be struggling to bring these pieces together?
I mean, you've had two great answers. Excuse the Budapest alarms outside. You've had two great answers. We've got to remember the people we're dealing with. Marketers' budgets in general in the last 5 years have gone from 10% of net revenue to 7%. They've got this compression. on their operating spend. And one of the places that money has gone is into building up technology debt, first in building a CDP, then probably doing an Adobe or a Salesforce stack, then moving to an Azure cloud to move the CDP, well, all this stuff. And people are wary of getting locked into this next debt that they have to repay with their operating ability to actually build their business. So composability is you've had a great description. Exactly right. I think of it as Lego. Lego is my favorite toy, and you want to have a big box of Lego that you can make any possible thing you want to play with out of, because we cannot predict what the foundation models will announce next week. And if you aren't built as Lego and you're built as a finished toy, and your toy doesn't fit in that new world, then you're really stepping backwards instead of stepping forward. So working out how you can stay Lego. I was lucky enough to go to Billund actually a few months ago to see original Lego pieces from 1957, and they haven't changed a hell of a lot because they worked out how to be composable then, and so that's the key.
Francisco, how does composability improve collaboration between marketing, customer experience, and data teams?
Well, I think it's an essential ingredient. I mean, I don't think you can really say you can have collaboration between sales, marketing, customer experience, the product teams without all these functions sharing the same data set, the same pool of data. And I think obviously from a large corporation perspective, we have to come to terms with the reality that sometimes we still have to contend with large monoliths. When you have like a sales force of tens of thousands of sales colleagues, it's highly likely that you will end up with sort of enterprise solutions, like Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics, etc. But I think the key to really sort of connect with also what the other panelists said, that the key here is to make sure that you retain your access to the data, that you don't let the data live only in one place. You don't let the data stay, for example, all on Salesforce or all on Microsoft Dynamics, but that you're abstracting the data into places that are available to all. And this can, to your question, Kevin, really unlock huge opportunities. For example, from a customer experience standpoint, being able to capture all signals from when a client or a prospect is interacting with us at an event to when they have a conversation with the sales teams that is recorded in meeting notes to finally when they potentially convert on our own website, being able to capture all these signals across different online and offline platforms can really inform a long-term customer experience considerations around how to better the journey, how to remove friction, etc., etc. If you have this data in isolated system and you have every time to do, batch cron jobs to get all this data out, you're losing all the insights and the speed that, to Leah's point, it's now part of everyday life. I mean, change is really the only constant, but not just change. The pace of change is incredibly fast, and so you can't really afford to have data in multiple places. So my advice is, even if you really have to embrace a monolith for either your marketing automation core or your sales CRM, make sure that you are taking the data out in a data lake that everybody can access and take advantage of.
All right, well, Francisco, that points us in a nice way to our third discussion point today, and that's really looking forward to 2026. Here we are, just the end of January of 2026. We've got the year ahead of us, so I'm curious what an AI-ready CDP must support in 2026. Companies, according to McKinsey, companies already using AI-ready CDPs that support structured and unstructured data see as much as 30% higher campaign conversion rates. That's really moving the needle. Joe, what are some of the essential capabilities an AI-ready CDP must support to be future-proof in 2026?
Yeah, so CDP, customer data platform, data being the key word there. Traditionally, we've seen either the data lives inside of a warehouse or potentially you bring it into an ecosystem, you create the 360 view, And those are all components that we think about as core capabilities of ACDP to say, hey, I want to either connect to data or I want to make data ready. I think one key feature that AI-ready CDPs should have is not just making data ready for activation and clean data or organized data, but providing context for decision making. So how do we get to that decision-ready data or metadata is going to be a key component. Now, traditionally, CDP also has the ability to say, okay, this data was used for this type of audience, and here is where it was activated. And so all of that needs to flow into usable components that can then be leveraged for learning, adjusting, planning, executing, optimizing, and so on and so forth. So that's one feature. The other one that I think about, which is going to be very critical, is how do I now marry a real-time signal with what has happened historically or historical context? Because I now have both the human and probably agentic processes or AI processes in real time trying to understand something just happened, and because something just happened, how do I adjust? And sometimes it is at the same time. Sometimes I need to do it at a later point in time, but I need to be able to process both that real-time signal along with understanding the historical context. So that I think becomes a very key and critical feature. And then the last one I would say, and I think this came out in some of our earlier discussions today, was I need to have built-in observability and built-in explainability for everything that happens, right? So then I can either increase my trust scores, right? Or say, hey, my trust scores aren't where it's supposed to be, and I know exactly where the gaps are. So I can then make the right investments and build the right strategies to be able to address that. And whether it is anchoring on that composable architecture story or potentially building the trust on the data layer, you have clear signals that are actionable. But you also know how something that you have done it can be auditable, right? So those I would say are the core features that I would think in an AI-ready CDP that we should start to see in 2026.
Now, Leah, Jill mentioned agentic processing. I'm curious from your perspective, how does agentic activation differentiate an AI-ready CDP from traditional platforms?
So I think from an agentic perspective, and we'll start there, agentic activation really looks at not just dashboards, and co-pilots, but it really helps with describing both. So I think for me, the CDPs in 2026, it must support that agentic activation through dashboards where you're describing the past, and that's what dashboards do. But co-pilots really assist with the analysis. And when you look at agentic specifically, agentic systems help decide and act within clear human guardrails. So you're thinking of the action and the activation. And the reason why I raise that is because in 2026, the CDPs must move from visibility to action. There's been a lot of talk, but we really need to act on it. So if you ask me on the 3 key points, not only from an agentic perspective, but it's also about, I think, the governance, so explainable AI by default. I keep raising that, but it's really important because our AI decisions must be traceable, they need to be auditable, and they need to be understandable, right? So explainability really builds that confidence for marketers. I think the second thing is around the support for structured and unstructured data, right? If you really think about that, it's around structured data tells us what happened. This is really how I see it. And unstructured data tells us why it happened. And so AI-ready platforms must responsibly connect both of them. And I think that there's a lot of work still to be done on that. And then really thirdly is the orchestration and not really the centralization of all of that. When you think of CDPs, they shouldn't hoard the data. They should really connect the intelligence across the different platforms. So think about CRMs, the warehouses, CX, and activation systems. All of that needs to be really orchestrated and really co-create the value off the back of that.
Now, Justin, Leah brings up an important point about structured and unstructured data. How should marketers evaluate whether their CDP can handle both structured and unstructured customer data effectively?
Well, the level of structure is in the eye of the beholder, and with the right AI systems, What matters is whether it's relevant to having a better understanding of a customer, a B2B customer, a B2C customer, whatever the case may be. Yeah, the promise of AI is, we've all been managers. Some of us have MBAs, whatever. We learned about the iron triangle of management: faster, better, cheaper. You can only have two, and it comes at the expense of the third one. But AI, really properly deployed, breaks the iron triangle. You can have faster, better, and cheaper. Right now, most effort is being put into doing things cheaper and faster because it's the best way to evidence to your business that the investment makes sense. Look at the money I've saved. Look how many more decisions I'm making. And I don't think people are holding themselves, going back to our first conversation about governance, to really saying, okay, we're making more of the same decisions we used to make. We're making them at roughly the same level of quality as we used to make, and it's costing us less to make them. That's fine. That's helping us on a margin perspective, but it's not helping us grow. So making sure that you're balancing your effort between the easier wins, frankly, easier wins, despite how complex this all is, the easier wins of faster and cheaper, to really be focusing on the governance of what a better decision looks like.
Now, Francisco, things are moving quickly, as they always seem to, but especially now. How can companies ensure their CDP remains adaptable to evolving AI capabilities as we move forward?
Well, I think a lot of what we discussed earlier really applies. So the modularity, the avoiding at all costs lock-in in providers, especially monolith ones. All of these are, I think, are recipes for a sustainable long-term data strategy. I also think that we saw in 2025 really generative AI getting into production use cases. And I believe 2026 will really be more about agentic. And by that, I mean the ability of all these combined AI technologies to work together to achieve a preset outcome that could be, for example, generate and run a campaign. So not just like create with generative AI the different contents and personalize for account-based marketing, for example, the content of a landing page. That all happened and is already happening, but it all happened in 2025. I think 26 is really bringing together all these different technologies and testing agents so that different capabilities, both Gen AI as well as previous generation AI, can really work together to automate entire workflows. And again, to what we said earlier, this cannot happen unless you have a modular, robust, trustworthy CDP that you can rely on, because otherwise agents will at some point get stuck either in the absence of data or simply to the point we made at the beginning of our conversation, there won't be enough trust for the company governance essentially and risk management committee to really sign off on the use case. You cannot really delegate to an agent if you don't trust your data. You cannot trust your data if you haven't done your homework when it comes to CDP and modularity. So I remember saying last year, 2025 is really the year where you get your data in order, because in 26 the acceleration will be so fast that those who haven't sort of fixed their data might find themselves at a disadvantage. So I would really encourage everybody who hasn't sort of taken data that seriously yet to close the gap as soon as possible the next couple of quarters.
Well, Francesco, Justin, Leah, Joe, it has been great speaking with you today. Where has our time gone? In our just a few remaining minutes that we have, I'm hoping each of you can provide us with one quick action item that our viewers can use to take advantage of your ideas and advice. Justin, do you have an action item for us?
Yes. My action item is this. Despite all this conversation about technology, the single bottleneck for deploying all this stuff remains humanity and always will be humanity. So instead of waiting for a magic system to come along and solve that stuff, get on with using what we have. The tools we have available to us today at heavily subsidized cost because of how much capital is flowing into the AI ecosystem will never be as inexpensive to fail as it is today. So just get on with it. Use this stuff before the rents go up. And one last thing, make a cup of coffee, sit in a corner, and read Dario Amadei's essay he released this week on the adolescence of technology. It is worth a read. It will surprise, delight, and scare you in equal measure. So that's my advice.
That is Justin Billingsley, co-founder and CMO of Symbiotic. Justin, thank you so much for being with us today. Francisco, do you have an action item for us today?
Yes, I would say perhaps going back to the point of pragmatism, I would say if you really want to sort of leave this conversation and start with something sort of really actionable, just map one high value use case that is sort of small enough to tackle, but big enough for your leadership to notice if you fix it, and then work backwards to identify every single data source, consent record, system integration required to make it work, etc., so that you have a blueprint of what you need to do to at least make it right for one key use case, and then grow from there.
All right, that is Francesco Federico, Chief Marketing Officer at S&P Global. Francisco, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Dr. Leah, do you have an action item for us?
Yes, I think making it practical as well. I would say thinking about it specifically for yourself and your team, which marketing decision would really create the most value if it were faster, perhaps more consistent, or kind of partially automated. So question that for yourself and your team and think about it, for example, like lead prioritization or, the next kind of best action or the next best practice, churn risk flags, something really practical. And then think of three key things that you can actually implement. So for me, I would say, and it's great to look at things in three always, audit your governance versus outcomes. So look at what AI policies you have in place and kind of rework those or make sure that they are in place. I would say define a AI ready scenario for your marketing team. So create a simple internal definition. What data can AI act on and so forth, like I spoke about earlier, unstructured data, structured data. So what data insight only you can actually drive. And then I think the last thing is probably appointing a decision owner, not just a data owner. So I've worked in many teams and work with many organizations where there's a lot of arguments or really, decisions that just based on the fact that you haven't outlined an actual owner or a role. So for each AI use case, assign a business decision owner and have it sit in marketing as well. So not just an IT or data owner, but a marketing owner for these use cases. So it reinforces accountability for the value, but also not just for compliance. It sits squarely in accountability for you as marketing.
That is Leah Hendricks, Managing Director, Executive Marketing, Global CMO Advisory at Hark Consultants. Leah, thank you so much for being with us today. And finally, Joe. Joe, do you have an action item for us?
I'm going to follow suit as Dr. Leah and Francesco. I think the name of the game in 2026 is narrowing scope. I think teams will be able to unlock way more value by narrowing scope and understanding, identifying how to perfect that rather than modernizing everything all at once, because momentum in the wrong direction leads to an accident, right? So that is something I feel like the team should definitely take seriously. And what that really means is when you're designing your strategy and your approach for 2026, design around those decisions that Dr. Leah mentioned, Francesco mentioned, not specifically boiling the ocean in certain cases, right? When it comes to data and readiness and systems and tools and adding more to what you already have today. And then close that gap, right? Where we started our conversation today, close that gap and get more AI ready with the right decision architecture in place. That would be my one component.
That is Joe Pulical, Director of Product Management at Uniphore. Joe, thank you so much for being with us. Dr. Leah Hendricks and Francisco Federico and Justin Billingsley. What a great panel today. Thank you so much. Your advice and perspectives were spot on. I hope that we get a chance to talk again soon. And to everyone else joining us today, thank you too. Join us again next time when we return on February 24th with another great panel of guests. We'll be discussing the topic of observability in the AI era, unlocking innovation and driving performance. That should be another great discussion. But if you'd like to find me in the meantime, you can do so on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect there, so check me out. I'm Kevin Crane, and you can check out my weekly audio podcast, the Digital Transformation Podcast. But for now, that'll do it for this episode of AI Talk. And until next time, I am Kevin Crane, saying thanks for watching.